All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me, or I'm the one joining you. Professor Wazi, thank you for the opportunity. Our colleagues from Germany, Ghana, and all other institutions are with it. We should thank you for being patient with me and waiting to hear my presentation or talk via Zoom, and not even a live one, but a recorded one. That I hope that this will become fruitful. So let's say, let me start by sharing the screen, and then I can talk to it. Great, I think it is working now. So let's do a little bit of housework. Okay, that is good. So the West African Biocultural Heritage Conservation Project started in 2017, and it began as part of my self-funded postdoc program. And this project was jointly developed by myself and a colleague at the Wildlife Division of the Forestry Commission, Mr. Moses Anongura, who was then the park manager for Shai Resource Reserve. We wish to acknowledge him. The overview of the presentation is as follows. So I will look quickly at the background to the project. We'll look at some of the definitions, the aim of the project, justification for it, the objectives, some of the sites where we work. We'll look at the work done so far, some of the benefits we have accrued, and also the challenges that we faced. We will move on from there to look at funding sources, and then the way forward. And I will summarize it and conclude it. So as I indicated earlier, this project was conceived and given birth to as a multidisciplinary, cross-disciplinary project that involves both archaeology, ethnography, historical studies, but also disciplines such as animal biology and conservation science, plant biology, and environmental science, and our colleagues who are into wildlife conservation, who work with the national parks, and of course the communities in which we work. So it is a truly collaborative work, and as you can see here, we have two major meetings in which we approach it from that perspective. So this is what we have. So Ghana has up to 21 protected areas that comprise national parks, resource reserves, forest reserves, and so on and so forth. And this project was developed to explore and research the cultural resources, the archaeological sites within these protected areas, because increasingly it is becoming very difficult to successfully carry on archaeological work at some of the sites because of land disputes, chieftaincy disputes, and so on and so forth. So the protected areas tend to give us a little bit more of a cover as archaeologists work in the country. But more importantly, these are sites that have been protected going back some to the 1960s, 70s, 80s. And so they are less disturbed as compared to other areas that have been bulldozed and where we are having uncontrolled construction or development going on. So the national parks or the protected areas present us with this enormous opportunity. One other reason why we're looking at the national parks and the protected areas as a source for our archaeological inquiry and also biocultural heritage conservation and research in general is that these are landscapes that were once homes to various groups of peoples of Ghana, ranging from the Shai Hills to Bui National Park to Mole National Park, where we have all these Kuma sites, and in Bui we have the Banda site, and so on and so forth. So these sites or areas present to us opportunities that we may not find outside the protected areas. Now, as I mentioned, inside the national parks, we have, like over here, the Kuma terracotta figurines associated with the Kumaland site in the northern regions of Ghana, many of which have been recovered from the Mole National Park. Over here, we have archaeological materials, these chalice vessels that have been recovered from Shai Hills by archaeology. So indeed, our national parks, our protected areas are full of biocultural heritage resources and assets that require some deep inquiry from a multidisciplinary and cross-disciplinary perspectives, particularly led by archaeologists, as we are doing in this case. And so what we're looking at essentially is bringing archaeological knowledge to investigating or researching our natural and cultural heritage within the national parks of Ghana. So what is it? When we say biocultural heritage, what are we referring to? This is relatively a new area of research, or a paradigm that is yet to catch up. People do understand or know about biodiversity conservation or biodiversity, which is seen mainly through the lens of the natural sciences, particularly the biological sciences. But we also do have what we call a biocultural heritage, which has been more or less limited to indigenous communities, but it's also highly applicable to sites in Ghana, Sub-Saharan Africa, in places where our livelihoods are still tied to natural, the natural environment, natural resources, biological resources, and so on and so forth. So I'll take two of these definitions quickly and then focus on a couple of them, and then we can go into the nitty-gritties of the work. So biocultural heritage here is defined as a complex system of interdependent parts centered on the relationship between indigenous peoples and their natural environment. So here I was saying that indigenous people in our case could be just most of our people are highly dependent on natural resources for their survival, the rainfall, the climatic patterns, and so on and so forth. So in this case, we are dealing with our peoples. And as you may be well aware, archaeologists deal with humans' relationship with the environment, how they adapted to it in the past, and how they continue to deal with it. And so looking at biocultural heritage, especially the last definition here, indeed, we are not just looking at biological resources, but also cultural memories. We are looking at ecological knowledge, indigenous knowledge systems, and how these have impacted on the current landscapes that we see around Ghana, many of which have been turned into protected areas. So the main aim of the West African Biocultural Heritage Project is to promote and facilitate, as I indicated earlier, cross-disciplinary and multidisciplinary research, education, training, and capacity building, especially from the perspective of archaeology, biocultural heritage, within the selected protected areas in Ghana. So specifically, we're looking at the development of facilities that will enable us to coordinate archaeological research, ethnographic research within the parks by setting up research libraries, digital labs, conservation laboratories, field laboratories to aid what we would say or call practical and field schools. The project also seeks to conduct intensive archaeological, ethnographic, biocultural, environmental, and community-based archaeology in our resource reserves, our national parks across the country. So what we're saying is that if you look at the current posture of archaeological research in Ghana, the knowledge that we generate tend to be limited to the scholarly community, researchers, academia. We are not making a maximum impact in the communities. Now, what we do know is that since some of these are national parks already abound in archaeological sites and heritage sites, the idea is to take the research work into the national parks, for example, which already attract thousands of visitors a year, so that archaeologists who are working in these parks, conducting park archaeology, biocultural heritage research, can be able to share the knowledge with the rest of the country. And also, one of the reasons why we are undertaking this project is to be able to draw on existing knowledge that we have. So for instance, many of us are not even aware that archaeological research has been done in underwater in this country. Marine archaeology along the coast of Elmina have been carried out by Gblerkpor and students of Professor Dikos from the University of Syracuse. And some of these finds are there. They are not being integrated into museums in the country because in the first place, we do not have many. The National Museum recently has been, or the gallery has been closed down. And so what this project also seeks to do is to bring some of the knowledge that we are having or gathering from different sites outside the national parks back into the space of the national parks. And then when these processes take place, what we're doing is integrating the knowledge that we are creating by researching in the national park with what is coming from outside the park, so that the museums, the laboratories, and the field schools and research facilities that we are creating in the national parks can be able to tell a holistic story of Ghana's past. These national parks and resource reserves are also, as I mentioned, homes to, or were homes to our peoples before they were relocated. And so the park management and the Forestry Commission allow these indigenous communities or local communities to come back to these national parks annually or depending on the time they choose to reunite with their landscapes and perform rites, rituals, and ceremonies in these national parks. And so for us archaeologists, these kinds of research within the national parks enable us or give us the opportunity to also directly engage with these descendant communities that come back on pilgrimages to the national parks. And as you can see here at Shai Hills, the people come back every year to celebrate the Mayan festival, or what we call the Millet Eating Festival. And all these are part of what we will call a biocultural heritage, biodiversity, because the people have indigenous knowledge systems, rituals, memories, cosmologies that tie in our food resources, being it yam festivals, millet eating festivals, maye, and all those that we may consider as part of our heritage. So for this project, the primary idea is to be able to integrate biological resources into archaeological knowledge or archaeological data that we are recovering. As you may well be aware, by 3,500 years during the Kintampo complex, we already saw evidence of exploitation of oil palm, millet, and other resources. And so what we're saying is that how do we bring together our knowledge from archaeology to our ethnographic present and also to our historical sources and oral traditions, in order to be able to have a much more consolidated and holistic knowledge about development, our heritage, what our ancestors bequeathed us in terms of their knowledge about medicinal plants, their knowledge about food crops, their knowledge about conservation, wildlife, sacred groves, and how all these are helping or have helped in the past in sustaining them and their environment. And so what the biodiversity conservation or biocultural heritage project seeks to do is to bring some of these knowledge systems into the public domain, particularly within the national parks, in the museum settings, in the open parks, in the archaeological sites within the parks, and so on and so forth. And we are not doing so not only by relying on archaeological knowledge, by knowledge from biomedical engineering, knowledge from animal biology and conservation science, plant biology, and so on and so forth. You may recall that at the peak of the COVID, a lot of plant resources were sought after, but these are all knowledge systems that have existed, some going back to a couple of thousands of years, and even more. So what this project seeks to do is to bring our knowledge from archaeology and parcel it or integrate it into biological resources in order to be able to present to our audiences the kind of knowledge systems that our peoples have acquired over the millennia, and what usefulness these knowledge systems hold for our new ways of adapting to the changing climate, dwindling resources, warming globe, and so on and so forth. So these are some of the elements that the biocultural heritage conservation looks at. We have plant resources that exist in so many other forms, which are endemic to specific regions of this country, like the Tebutela genti, for instance, which is being analyzed here. It was taken from the Akwamu Gorge area, which is a conservation area, and sent to Kew Gardens for analysis. These plants pose very promising, I would say, knowledge and potential for medicinal extracts and so on and so forth. We do know that many of the existing pharmaceutical products were sorted from parts of our country, like in the Shai, over 200 specimens were collected, some of which have been synthesized and used as industrial, at the industrial level, where they have been produced and sold back to us without any, what I would say, benefit to our local people whose knowledge were tapped. The project also seeks to utilize efficiently the national parks as training grounds for our students, for our annual archaeology field schools, but also summer field programs and regular training, because I mean the universities do not have all the resources that are required for our training, but within the national parks, through our research projects there, we are creating more opportunities for our students to undertake ethnographic studies, archaeological studies, and so many other kind of areas of interest in archaeology. So here, for instance, through archaeological materials, we are able to collaborate with the Biomedical Engineering Department of the University of Ghana to analyze certain clay materials, some of which are very promising when it comes to their usage as a biological interface or materials for biomedical application. So the Biocultural Heritage Conservation Project is a little bit bigger project that is not reliant on just specific sites and results coming from archaeological work in this site, but rather drawing on primary or original research being done, but also on archaeological knowledge that have already been accrued from other researches that have been conducted across the country, and to bring these to the public space, particularly within the national parks, for our people to get access to. And by doing so, we also hope to promote wildlife, biodiversity conservation, so on and so forth. We do know that from our archaeological records, we recover many of animal remains, from tamed to domesticated to wild animals. And in our work recently at the Molly National Park, brought out many of those remains, including elephant teeth, the remains of buffalo. And we do find these in the Shai Hills, Gblerkpor Hills, and other parts of the country. Some of our national parks, like Molly, has a little museum that we have been working with them on. And of course, later on, we will talk about the Shai Hills Museum. As I indicated, so here we have some of our students previously undertaking research using archaeological materials to interrogate some practitioners in the communities. The West African Biocultural Heritage Conservation Project also promotes training and exchange of ideas with our colleagues in the Forestry Commission, particularly those in the Wildlife Division. So because these archaeological resources exist in the park, we undertake training with them to enable them to identify, record archaeological sites, and be able to provide some protection for them beyond the traditional means that they are used to. So these are some of the work we've been doing: identify the sites, geotagging them, mapping them out, and also, more importantly, selecting some for conservation. In this country, we are yet to develop site management plans for archaeological sites. And so we are experimenting with that with some students' project at Shai Hills, where we are looking at how to preserve, sustainably conserve some of these archaeological remnants which are being destroyed by the trees that are growing wild at the park. So it is an ongoing process, and it's through partnership and sharing ideas that we can be able to fully exploit both our natural resources and our cultural resources. Now, going forward, the question is, so what have we done so far? Besides the meetings we have had, the collaborative engagements, what are some of the tangibles that we can talk about, or deliverables? One of the things we did was to try to renovate an abandoned structure, which was built originally to serve as a cultural center and archaeological lab for the work that our late Professor Kwanda was doing at Shai Hills. Unfortunately, this was not realized, and by 10 years after the building was constructed, 2013, it was completely abandoned and became a safety hazard, and there were plans to pull it down. Fortunately, this project came in handy, and we began to work at this site. And as we speak today, the processes of our collaboration and engagement have seen as successfully renovating the site from when the baboons were in charge of the site to the period when, through volunteers from the University of Ghana, from the community, and high school students, volunteers from Germany, we began to work on it. Eventually, we were able to renovate the site, and it's now a museum, which we have named the Museum of Natural and Cultural Heritage at Shai Hills. So the idea is to have a number of these museums across the country, particularly in the national park. So our next target is to have the Museum of Natural and Cultural Heritage at Mali. Now, we're doing this because these museums are not just places for displaying archaeological materials or artifacts, but they are research centers. There are research units where we are able to engage the communities, we are able to organize lectures, and so on and so forth. Now, one of the attempts we made was to set up a Center for Applied Archaeology and Biodiversity Conservation. But the processes of getting a center established at the University of Ghana is a little bit, they are long and they take a longer time. But having such museums in which we have laboratories, libraries, digital centers, we are able to conduct research without calling ourselves a Center for Applied Archaeology and Biodiversity Conservation, but a museum in which we conduct research. So to sum up, what I can say is that the West African Biocultural Heritage Conservation project is providing us opportunities to collaborate with our colleagues in the Forestry Commission, particularly the Wildlife Division, to provide training opportunities for our students in archaeology, in animal biology, and biodiversity conservation to use these national parks as experiential and hands-on learning locations and sites, and also providing opportunities for our communities to benefit from the kind of archaeological work that we have been doing across the country. So the bottom line is that we have found a loophole that the archaeological knowledge we are creating have not essentially been reaching to our peoples across the country. And we've seen the national parks as very opportune locations where we can easily be able to engage in archaeological research, biodiversity conservation, and also field training, public archaeology, community engagement. All right, so that is what we've done so far. In terms of funding, we are yet to get any significant support. So I have personally funded most of these up to about 90%. We have had some support from the Sankofa project of through an NGO, the Mellon Foundation through the University of Ghana, then also families and friends. So these are some of the things that we have done so far. Now going forward, what are some of the challenges that we are facing? We have signed an MOU. The University of Ghana has signed it. The Forestry Commission is yet to sign it. So we have not fully implemented the West African Biocultural Heritage Conservation Program yet. And so hopefully when this is designed and signed, we'll be able to provide a greater opportunity for our students, for our colleagues in the Forestry Commission, and also for Ghanaians and our international partners, the opportunity to come and learn within our national parks. Thank you for your time. I hope I didn't exceed all my time. it was a little bit difficult for me recording this on my own. I hope I made some points clear to you. So if there is a need to have some further questions, I will share my email address with the organizers of the meeting so that you can contact me directly. Thank you for your time. I appreciate your patience. Thank you. Stay blessed.